I hadn't originally planned on making a coronavirus video, but it's been by far the most requested thing from you lot, and never let it be said that I don't listen to the great unwashed. Quite literally, because a lot of you are still not getting the message about washing your hands. Now, there are many fantastic videos about coronavirus already out there. I'll put some of the best links below. So I didn't think I had a lot to add, but it was actually chatting to Dr. Mike, Chubby Emu and Eric Strong, who are responsible for some of those really good videos, that convinced me to join in, because they were explaining that there's a lot of misinformation out there, so the more people that join in spreading sensible stuff, the better. With that having been said though, I am not an infectious disease nor public health doctor. However, I am a delicate social butterfly with friends in the right places, and I'm very lucky to have talked to two friends involved in the British response, public health doctors here in the UK dealing with COVID-19, and another friend who works for the CDC in America. Now, they can't talk to the press directly because their organizations want to have a consistent message from their press office, so they've spoken to me off the record. I'm not going to share their names publicly, but I'm very grateful for their help. I asked you what you wanted to know, and I've received hundreds of replies. Thank you very much. I've kind of grouped them together into themes, and I'm going to divide my responses into a few short videos instead of one long one. I thought I'll have more chance of uploading that way, so don't expect any fancy editing. Some of the themes I want to tackle in videos are background to the disease, one specifically on coronavirus and the heart, because that's been implicated as a key mechanism in the patients who've died, what a pandemic might look like from a hospital doctor's point of view, and a slightly more light-hearted video that I'm hoping to get out in the next few days. But for this first video, I want to concentrate on treatment. How are we going to beat coronavirus? First of all, let's start with some quick numbers. 81% of the cases are mild, 14% are severe, i.e. requiring maybe hospitalization, 5% are critical, typically requiring intensive care. The latest published fatality rate has nudged up ever so slightly to 3.3%. Now, those numbers drastically change if you only consider the elderly or those with pre-existing medical conditions, especially cardiovascular and lung disease, in whom a large number will require hospitalization. Fatality rate in those populations is between 8 to 15%. All of these numbers may well be an overestimate, as there are likely many mild cases that are not diagnosed. We also know that there are people who have no symptoms but who test positive, which is important because that means the presence of symptoms is not required to spread the disease. And coupled with the long incubation period of probably around 2 weeks for SARS-CoV-2 is why we're seeing such rapid spread. We've experienced things like this before with SARS, MERS, the various influenza outbreaks, but after a while they just seem to go away. So how does that happen, and will the same take place this time? Sometimes viruses just burn out. They infect everybody they can and essentially then disappear, and this can be encouraged by effective quarantining. Of course, all of this only works on the assumption that once somebody has recovered from the virus, they will not contract it again. And one of the most common questions I've got is about reports that some patients have been reinfected after recovery. So let's just explore that. This is based on the published finding that some patients who are recovered still tested positive for the virus later on. Now, the test is a reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, RT-PCR test, meaning that viral RNA is detected. It's led to a lot of concern that reinfection is fairly common. However, talking to virologists, I've learned that having a positive test for up to 30 days after recovery is fairly normal in many common viral infections, and it does appear that the period of viral shedding is prolonged for SARS-CoV-2. The JAMA piece linked below shows that the RT-PCR test stays positive for a long time, even after 2 negative tests. So I don't think it's proven that people are being reinfected, although of course that's a possibility, but I think what's happened is people have had false negative tests and were never truly negative. The bad news is that it might suggest that people stay infectious for a long time. Again, we're not sure. The concept behind quarantine is that enough people develop antibodies and hence the virus stops being able to spread from person to person, which is of course the exact same way that vaccines work. This burnout is essentially how we beat SARS. Quarantining affected people until the incubation and infectious period was over. The difference is this time it's on a much larger scale already. It appears likely that the virus will now spread worldwide, as while it's still only about 6% of cases overall that are from outside China, we're now seeing far more new cases outside of China. Therefore, this burnout might only occur when enough people worldwide have been affected and the virus can no longer spread. Another possible end for the virus is to become a kind of permanent fixture the way flu is now. Flu is essentially in every country a true pandemic, and we could see a kind of seasonal coronavirus that just becomes a normal thing, although it mutates far more slowly than influenza, so you'd probably have immunity for quite a while, maybe a few years or even longer, until another strain comes along. Even if we eradicate it from humans, it might continue to exist in animal reservoirs and re-emerge later with some new and improved upgrades. One interesting factor to consider is that we've only been able to detect coronaviruses easily in the last few decades, so we might have had similar epidemics and pandemics in the past which simply weren't picked up or chalked up to localized outbreaks of something like flu. So although we're understandably alarmed by the current news, there are large elements of this that are probably nothing new, but the world is a different place, it's more crowded, people travel more, so there are new challenges as well. What is the timescale on a worldwide burnout of the virus then? Well, definitely months at the shortest, but some projections suggest more like a couple of years. Of course, the next thing to consider is a vaccine. People seem kind of dismayed that authorities are saying that a vaccine might take 18 months to 2 years, but vaccines normally take the best part of a decade to make, so this really is everything moving as fast as possible. So why does it take so long? A positive step in the wake of COVID-19 in comparison to SARS is the comparative openness of the Chinese government, who were immensely secretive during the SARS outbreak. They have realized, at least to an extent, that information sharing is essential, as no one institution nor country is going to make this vaccine in isolation. So only weeks after the disease was recognized, the entire genetic code was published online by the Chinese. Within a fortnight, it had been cultured outside of China, I think in Australia first. And then the next step in making a vaccine is developing an animal model. For SARS, which is of course another coronavirus, we used ferrets, and that was how the original source of the virus was identified as being bats. In fact, the SARS outbreak has prepared the scientific community in many ways for SARS-CoV-2, and as a result, we might see a vaccine in a record time if everything goes well. Next comes testing for efficacy and safety in the animal model. The vaccine needs to elicit an immune system response without being harmful. And finally, more safety checks before human trials. There are many steps which simply can't be skipped. And last of all, there has to be a way to manufacture the vaccine on a large scale at a cost that will be sustainable when scaled up. Medications. Now, some people have been asking about efficacy of things like malaria medication, antiretroviral HIV drugs, and a few other agents. At this stage, there's no evidence that anything like that works specifically for COVID-19, but a few promising therapies for reduction of severity in cases of viral pneumonia do exist. This video is more about how we're going to beat coronavirus on a population scale. If you want to know more about treatment of an individual with a severe infection, i.e. what we do in intensive care, I'm going to deal with that in more detail in another one of these installments. Finally, of course, the main way we're going to beat this is through very low tech. Basic precautions, namely washing your hands properly, self-isolating if you're unwell, maintaining a distance between yourself and someone who's sneezing or coughing, avoiding touching your face. This is all the advice of the WHO, but importantly, do also pay attention to your local health authorities' advice. I'll highlight one bit of that because I know that most of my viewers on this channel are between 15 and 50 years old. Most of you are unlikely to have major medical conditions. Now, if you're severely unwell, of course, seek help. Short of breath, falling over, dizzy, low blood pressure. But if your symptoms are manageable, if you feel you have basically a nasty cold or flu, please don't go to the emergency department or your doctor's surgery waiting room, because that is the best way to spread the virus to high-risk groups, as well as placing strain on the health system. I've seen lots of posts about alcohol gel being useless, go viral. I didn't even mean that pun. Go viral. And while it is not as effective as good hand washing, it's not useless at all, and provided it's strong enough, it's a very sensible measure to take if you can't get to a wash basin. There are plenty of good videos from the WHO and Public Health England on how to wash your hands, which you might think you already know how to do, but you'd be surprised how many people do it badly, so do take a look. However, none of them are as amazing as the songs we're now seeing emerge from around the world. A lot of you probably saw the instant club classic from Vietnam on John Oliver's show. So let me end with Ecuador's infectious hit. If you have specific questions, stick them below and I'll do my best to answer them in future videos.
No se toquen la cara, evítenlo amigos. Coronavirus, coronavirus. Usan desinfectante, ese es muy efectivo.